Hello and welcome. Find a comfortable place to rest and allow your mind to drift back in time. We are not visiting the grand colosseums or the bustling forums of the ancient Roman Empire. Instead, we are journeying to its quiet corners to discover the gentle, peaceful, and relaxing aspects of daily life. Let the soft whispers of history soothe you as we explore 50 simple truths about a world long past. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let us begin. In a world without refined sugar, the ancient Romans found their sweetness in the golden gift of bees. Honey was not just a food, but a medicine, a preservative, and an offering to the gods. Imagine a Roman kitchen, bathed in soft morning light, a clay pot filled with fragrant amber honey sitting on a wooden table. It was drizzled over fresh bread, stirred into wine, and used to sweeten simple cakes. This natural, soothing sweetness was a gentle constant in daily life, a simple pleasure harvested from the wild blossoms of the Italian countryside. Beyond the stone walls of their homes, Romans cultivated serene sanctuaries of peace and tranquility. These were the peristyle gardens, open courtyards filled with carefully chosen plants, fragrant flowers like roses and lilies, and often the gentle sound of water. Small fountains trickled into marble basins, and shaded walkways offered a cool respite from the sun. These gardens were places for quiet contemplation, for reading, or for simply listening to the sound of birds and the rustle of leaves. They were a piece of nature, lovingly curated in the heart of the home. As daylight faded, the Roman world was not plunged into darkness. Instead, it was filled with the soft, warm glow of countless tiny flames. Olive oil lamps, crafted from clay or bronze, were the gentle light sources of the evening. Each home would have many, casting flickering, dancing shadows on the walls. Imagine the quiet of a Roman villa at night, the only light coming from these small, steady flames, creating an atmosphere of intimacy and calm. It was a soft light, perfect for a quiet meal, a hushed conversation, or drifting off to sleep. The Romans understood the value of rest. After the midday meal, during the hottest part of the day, it was common practice to take a nap, a tradition known as meridiatio. Businesses would close, the streets would quiet down, and people would retreat indoors for a period of sleep or quiet repose. This was not seen as laziness, but as a sensible way to recharge one's energy for the remainder of the day. It was a built-in pause, a collective moment of stillness that settled over the bustling cities and quiet countryside alike. The Roman home was not just for humans. Many families cherished animal companions. Small dogs, similar to modern Maltese, were popular lapdogs, often depicted in art, and on gravestones with their loving owners. Cats were valued for their pest control abilities, but were also kept as gentle companions. Even birds, such as doves and parrots, were kept in ornate cages, their songs adding to the peaceful ambiance of the home. These animals were part of the family, offering quiet companionship and a simple, unconditional affection. Water was the lifeblood of Rome, and its sound was a constant soothing presence. Through magnificent aqueducts, fresh water flowed for miles from distant springs into the cities. It filled the great public baths, trickled from ornate public fountains where citizens could collect water and chat, and grace the gardens of private homes. The gentle murmur, splash, and flow of water was an everyday soundtrack, a reminder of nature, cleanliness, and the ingenuity that brought this calming element into the very heart of urban life. Imagine the patience and focus required to create a Roman mosaic. A craftsman would sit for hours, days, and weeks, carefully cutting small pieces of colored stone, glass, or ceramic, called tesserae. With quiet dedication, they would place each tiny piece into a bed of mortar, slowly revealing a complex pattern or a lifelike image. This was a meditative, meticulous art form. The workshops would have been filled with a quiet concentration, the only sounds being the gentle click of stone against stone, as enduring beauty was created, piece by tiny piece. Long before the printing press, Romans valued knowledge and provided quiet spaces for its pursuit. Major cities in the empire boasted impressive public libraries, often with separate sections for Greek and Latin texts. Scrolls were kept in numbered wooden cabinets called armaria. These libraries were calm, orderly sanctuaries where scholars, students, or any literate citizen could come to read and study in peace. They were quiet havens of learning, a testament to a culture that cherished the written word. During the cooler months, wealthy Romans enjoyed a quiet, invisible luxury, central heating. The hypocaust system was an ingenious form of underfloor heating. A furnace, tended by slaves, would heat air that circulated through a space under the floor, which was raised on small pillars. The warm air would rise, gently heating the marble or mosaic floor and the very air in the room. This silent, radiant heat created a cozy and comfortable environment, a gentle warmth that emanated from the ground up, protecting against the winter chill. One of the most comforting scents in any culture is that of baking bread, and ancient Rome was no exception. Large commercial bakeries, or pistrina, were common in cities, often featuring large donkey-powered mills to grind grain. The warm, yeasty aroma would drift through the nearby streets, a familiar and reassuring smell. For many Romans, their daily bread was not baked at home, but purchased from these bakeries. The simple, life-sustaining scent of baking bread was a comforting backdrop to the rhythm of everyday urban life. In a vast empire, personal connections were maintained through the quiet, intimate act of letter writing. A Roman would sit with a sheet of papyrus, a reed pen, and a pot of ink made from soot and gum. They would carefully compose their thoughts, news, and affections. The process was slow and deliberate. Once finished, the letter was rolled up, tied with a string, and sealed with wax. This tangible piece of communication would then travel for weeks or months, a silent carrier of personal thoughts across great distances. Romans enjoyed moments of quiet recreation, and board games were a popular pastime. One of the most common was ludus latrunculorum, or the game of mercenaries. It was a game of strategy, similar to chess or drafts, played on a gridded board. Two players would sit in quiet concentration, contemplating their next move. The only sounds would be the gentle click of glass or stone game pieces on the wooden board. It was a peaceful way to engage the mind and share a quiet moment of friendly competition. The Romans had a deep understanding of the natural world and its healing properties. They knew that certain plants could be used to create soothing remedies. Chamomile was brewed into a calming tea to aid sleep and reduce anxiety. Lavender was used in bath water for its relaxing fragrance and was believed to soothe headaches. Poultices of yarrow were used to treat wounds. In gardens and apothecaries, these gentle natural medicines were prepared, offering a quiet, fragrant form of relief and comfort drawn directly from the earth. For wealthy Romans, the country villa was an escape from the noise and pressures of city life. These were not just large houses, but sprawling estates with working farms, olive groves, and vineyards. Life at the villa was governed by the slower rhythms of nature and the seasons. It was a place for otium, a state of peaceful leisure, dedicated to reading, writing, walking through the fields, and enjoying the simple pleasures of the countryside. These villas were havens of tranquility, designed for rest and reflection. In a Roman home, the rhythmic sound of a loom was a familiar and calming presence. Weaving was primarily women's work, a quiet and essential craft. Using a vertical loom, they would methodically pass the shuttle back and forth, slowly creating fabric from threads of wool or linen. The repetitive motion, the gentle thud of the beater packing the threads, and the gradual emergence of a pattern created a meditative atmosphere. It was a slow, productive art that clothed the family and filled the home with a sense of quiet industry. Simple pleasures were deeply valued, and few were more cherished than eating a fresh, ripe fig. Figs grew abundantly throughout the Mediterranean, plucked straight from the tree. On a warm afternoon, the fruit was soft, sweet, and bursting with flavor. It was a perfect natural confection that required no preparation. This simple act of eating a fresh fig was a direct connection to the land and the season, a moment of pure, uncomplicated enjoyment, and a taste of the sweetness of life. The clothing of the Romans was made from natural, comfortable materials. The most common fabric was wool, sourced from the millions of sheep that grazed the Italian hillsides. The wool was spun into thread and woven into cloth that was soft to the touch and warm to wear. The feeling of a clean woolen tunic or the heavy, comforting drape of a toga was a daily sensory experience. It was a connection to the pastoral landscape, a simple tactile comfort that insulated against the cold and softened the edges of the world. While we often picture Romans reading from scrolls, they were also responsible for an invention that shaped the future of reading, the codex. This was the earliest form of the modern book, with individual pages cut from papyrus or parchment and bound together at one edge. It was more durable and easier to navigate than a scroll. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of the first person to turn a page, rather than unroll a scroll, easily finding a passage in this new, convenient format. It was a quiet revolution in how knowledge was stored and accessed. In a world without printing, every book was a work of manual art. Scribes, often educated slaves, who would spend their days in a scriptorium, a room dedicated to copying text. With intense focus, they would painstakingly replicate each word from an original scroll or codex onto a new one. The room would be filled with a hushed silence, broken only by the scratching of pens and the occasional rustle of papyrus. It was a profoundly peaceful and concentrated labor that preserved literature, history, and philosophy for future generations. The Romans prized cleanliness, and their bathing rituals were elaborate. A simple but luxurious tool in this process was the sea sponge. Harvested from the clear waters of the Mediterranean, these natural sponges were soft, absorbent, and gentle on the skin. In the warm, steamy air of the bathhouse, the feeling of a soft, water-laden sponge was a small sensory pleasure. It was a direct gift from the sea, a simple organic element in a daily ritual of relaxation and purification. The Romans held a gentle belief that every person, place, and even object had a guardian spirit known as a genius. This was not a spirit to be feared, but a protective and guiding presence. A person's genius was honored on their birthday, and the genius loci was the spirit of a particular place, like a grove or a spring. This belief filled the world with a quiet magic, the comforting idea that one was never truly alone, and that a benevolent, unseen force watched over them and their surroundings. Olive oil was essential to Roman life, used for cooking, lighting, and bathing. This liquid gold came from ancient olive groves, some with trees that were hundreds of years old. Tending these groves was a slow, patient task, passed down through generations. Farmers would carefully prune the gnarled silverleaf trees and wait patiently for the autumn harvest. The groves themselves were places of deep peace, quiet sanctuaries under the Mediterranean sun, symbols of longevity and nourishment. While we often think of Roman pottery, their glass-making skills were extraordinary. Roman artisans mastered the art of glass blowing, creating delicate and beautiful vessels in shades of blue, green, and clear. Imagine a simple glass bottle or cup holding water or wine. The way the light would pass through it, casting a soft, colored shadow on a wooden table, was a small, everyday moment of beauty. These objects, though fragile, brought a touch of elegance and light to the Roman home. Roman temples were not just for grand ceremonies. On an ordinary day, the temple precinct would be a place of quiet and solace. A citizen could enter the sacred grounds to make a personal offering, say a quiet prayer, or simply sit in contemplation. The thick stone walls would muffle the sounds of the city, creating a serene and reverent atmosphere. Surrounded by columns and statues of the gods, it was a space to find a moment of peace and connect with the divine in a personal and tranquil way. At the center of a traditional Roman house, or domus, was an open-air courtyard called the atrium. In the middle of the atrium floor was a shallow rectangular pool known as the impluvium. An opening in the roof directly above allowed rainwater to collect gently in the pool. On a rainy day, the sound of drops pattering into the water would create a soothing, natural music. The impluvium brought the gentle elements of the outside world, rain, light, and air, into the very heart of the home. Without the light pollution of modern cities, the night sky for the Romans was a breathtaking spectacle. They looked to the stars, not just with wonder, but for practical reasons. The constellations helped farmers know when to plant and harvest, and sailors navigate the seas. Imagine a Roman shepherd or a sailor, lying on their back on a clear, quiet night, watching the slow, majestic procession of the stars across the dark expanse. It was a moment of connection to the vast, silent, and orderly cosmos. The footwear of the common Roman was simple and practical. They wore sandals or simple leather shoes, often with wooden soles. On the stone-paved streets of a Roman city, the gentle clatter and scrape of these wooden soles would have been a constant ambient sound. It was not a loud or intrusive noise, but a soft rhythmic percussion that spoke of people going about their daily lives, walking to the market, visiting a friend, or returning home. It was the quiet, unassuming sound of a world in motion. Roman homes were often decorated with beautiful wall paintings called frescoes. This technique involved painting with pigments on wet lime plaster. As the plaster dried, the paint became a permanent part of the wall. The artist had to work quickly and with a steady hand. It was a quiet and focused art form. The result was a soft matte finish that gave the paintings a gentle, dreamlike quality. These frescoes brought scenes of nature, mythology, and daily life into the home, filling the rooms with silent, colorful stories. The Romans followed a market cycle of 8 days, known as the nundinal cycle. The 8th day, the nundinae, was a day of rest and market for farmers and rural people. They would come into the city to sell their goods, catch up on news, and relax. While not a weekend in our modern sense, it was a regular, predictable day of rest from hard agricultural labor. This rhythm of work and rest was a fundamental part of life, providing a necessary and welcome pause in the weekly routine. Every coin used in the vast Roman Empire was made by hand. A craftsman, called a monetarius, would take a heated blank disc of metal and place it between 2 engraved dies. Then, with a heavy hammer, another worker would strike the die, impressing the emperor's portrait and other symbols onto the coin. While the strike itself was loud, the process of engraving the dies was one of immense quiet skill and precision, creating miniature works of art that would pass through countless hands. Music was woven into the fabric of Roman life, and one of the most beloved instruments was the lyre. Its sound was not loud or bombastic, but gentle, sweet, and resonant. The lyre was played at parties, during religious ceremonies, and to accompany poetry readings. Imagine a quiet evening, with a skilled musician softly plucking the strings of a lyre, its delicate, calming notes filling the air. It was a sound of civilization, art, and peaceful contemplation. During the winter festival of Saturnalia, social norms were relaxed, and a spirit of generosity filled the air. One of the most charming traditions was the giving of small, inexpensive gifts called sigiliaria. These were often small pottery or wax figurines, or simple items like candles and writing tablets. The emphasis was not on the value of the gift, but on the gesture of friendship and goodwill. It was a time of simple, heartfelt exchanges that strengthened bonds in a spirit of quiet joy. For a quick, simple meal, many Romans would visit a thermopolium. These were small storefronts that opened directly onto the street, with a counter containing large earthenware pots filled with ready-to-eat food. One could buy a warm stew, bread, or a cup of wine. While it could be a bustling place, one can also imagine a quiet moment, stopping on a cool day for a steaming bowl of lentil soup, a simple, warm, and nourishing comfort food that was readily available to all. The famous Roman roads were marvels of engineering, built to last for centuries. While the work was hard, it was also methodical and precise. Legions of soldiers and engineers worked with quiet efficiency, digging foundations, laying stones, and ensuring a perfect, even surface. There was a steady rhythmic quality to the work, the chipping of stone, the tamping of earth. It was a slow, deliberate process of creation, piece by piece, that connected an empire with arteries of stone. As we learned, honey was precious to the Romans. This meant that beekeeping, or apiculture, was a respected and gentle art. Beekeepers would create hives from pottery, wicker, or hollowed-out logs. They would tend their bees with care, understanding their cycles and ensuring their well-being. The sound of a Roman apiary would have been a peaceful, constant hum, the sound of thousands of tiny creatures working in harmony, creating the sweet golden liquid that was so treasured. For many Romans, the main meal of the day, the cena, was an important social ritual. The family would gather, often reclining on couches around a low table, and share several courses of food. While some banquets could be extravagant, an everyday family meal was a time for conversation and connection. In the soft glow of oil lamps, it was a chance to put aside the day's work and enjoy the simple, comforting act of sharing food with loved ones. While we focus on the great cities, the vast majority of people in the Roman Empire lived in the countryside. Their lives were quiet and dictated by the sun and the seasons. The world was filled with natural, soothing sounds: the wind in the grain fields, the bleating of sheep on a distant hill, the flow of a small stream. It was a life of hard work, but also one of deep connection to the land and a profound, abiding peace far from the clamor of the city. Before the large donkey mills, and in many homes, grain was ground by hand using a quern. This simple device consisted of two circular stones, one on top of the other. A person, usually a woman or a slave, would pour grain into a hole in the top stone and turn it, slowly grinding the grain into flour. The sound was a gritty, rhythmic, circular scrape, a constant, earthy sound of food preparation. It was a meditative, repetitive task that was fundamental to the making of daily bread. The Romans enjoyed pleasant scents, which they created from natural sources. Perfumes were oil-based, infused with the fragrance of flowers like roses, lilies, and violets, or with spices such as cinnamon and myrrh. These scents were not overpowering, but gentle and personal. A person would apply a small amount of the fragrant oil, and it would create a subtle, pleasant aura. The creation of these perfumes in an apothecary's shop was a quiet art of blending and infusion. For the Romans, continuing the family line was paramount. When a family had no natural heir, adoption was a common and respected practice. It was a formal, serious process that created a legal and emotional bond just as strong as one of blood. This practice ensured that family names, traditions, and property could be passed down through generations. It was a quiet, legal, and deeply personal act that emphasized the importance of lineage and continuity over pure biology. To tell time during the day, Romans relied on the silent movement of the sun. The sundial, or solarium, was a common sight in public squares and private gardens. As the sun moved across the sky, the shadow of its gnomon would creep slowly across the marked lines, indicating the hour. Watching a sundial was a lesson in patience, a quiet observation of the Earth's steady, silent rotation. It was a way of telling time that was deeply connected to the natural rhythm of the day. Within the grand public baths, one of the most relaxing areas was the caldorium, a room with a hot plunge bath. The room was filled with hot, steamy air from the underfloor heating system. Soaking in the hot water was a way to relax tired muscles, open the pores, and drift into a state of deep calm. The acoustics of the high, vaulted ceilings would make the quiet sounds of splashing water and hushed voices echo gently, creating a soothing, dreamlike soundscape. The Romans were skilled surveyors and map makers, needing to understand and manage their vast empire. Creating a map on a large sheet of parchment was a slow, meticulous process. A cartographer would work in quiet concentration, using data from surveyors to carefully draw coastlines, trace the paths of rivers and roads, and mark the locations of cities. It was a peaceful, intellectual pursuit that aimed to bring order and understanding to a vast and complex world. The Romans enjoyed a variety of warm beverages. One popular drink was calda, which was simply hot water, often mixed with herbs or spices for flavor. Another was warm wine, sometimes sweetened with honey and spiced with cinnamon or cloves, a forerunner of modern mulled wine. On a cold evening, the simple act of holding a warm ceramic cup and sipping a fragrant heated drink was a source of immense comfort, a gentle way to ward off the chill and relax before sleep. While we are familiar with Roman sculptures, they also had a tradition of realistic portrait painting, especially the Fayum mummy portraits from Roman Egypt. An artist would paint a subject's likeness on a wooden panel. The process required the sitter to remain still for a long period, in quiet contemplation. The artist, too, worked with focused silence. The result is a startlingly lifelike and soulful image, a quiet moment between two people, frozen in time. Perhaps the most relaxing Roman fact of all is that they had a word for a specific kind of peaceful leisure: odium. This was not laziness, but a valued state of being, free from the obligations of business and politics. Odium was time dedicated to quiet, enriching pursuits: reading, philosophy, writing, appreciating art, and quiet contemplation. It was a recognition that a life well lived required not just work, but also periods of profound and restorative peace. It was a time to simply be. The quiet corners of the past hold a gentle wisdom. In the hum of the bees, the warmth of the hearth, and the silent passage of a shadow on a sundial, the ancient Romans found their moments of peace. The world has changed, but the human need for tranquility remains the same. As we return from our journey, may you carry some of this ancient calm with you. Rest well, and may your dreams be peaceful.